Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for AIANTA's webinar, Managing Community and Visitor Expectations in the Times of COVID-19. My name is Sherry Bowman. I am AIANTA's Education Support Specialist, and today I will be serving as your webinar moderator. For those of you who are not familiar with AIANTA, we are the only national organization that defines, introduces, grows, and sustains American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian tourism that honors traditions and values. We provide tourism-related education to tribes across the United States. In addition to webinars, AIANTA also provides online partnership-based cultural heritage certificate program in partnership with the George Washington University, running from October 5th through November 22nd, 2020. AIANTA also provides education opportunities for tribes through our American Indian Tourism Conference, which is AITC. We have a great lineup of speakers this year for our 22nd annual conference, and we will be holding the conference virtually September 14th through the 18th. Registration is now open, so please visit our website. We are excited to present today's webinar, Managing Community and Visitor Expectations in the Time of COVID-19. Native communities have faced tremendous challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic. As tribes plan to reopen to visitors, it is important that their destinations and tourism businesses take into account shifting trends and operational requirements for consumer travel. Locals and travelers are eager to get out of the house, but their travel choices will be shaped by their perceptions of health and safety. During this 1-hour webinar, AIANTA will moderate a panel discussing steps that destinations and businesses can take to plan for reopening while maintaining the safety of their communities. If you have any questions during this presentation, please type them into the Q&A box in your control panel, and if time allows, I will facilitate the questions and answers at the end of the presentation. I'd like to introduce our 3 panelists today, starting with Melvin Juanico, who is from the Pueblo of Acoma. Melvin has lived on the Acoma Indian Reservation most of his life. He graduated from St. Catherine's Indian High School in Santa Fe, New Mexico in 1981. After graduating from high school, Melvin joined the workforce in the uranium mining industry, road construction, and as a detention and security officer. Melvin served for the Pueblo of Acoma tribal government as the tribal interpreter in 2003 through 2004. And in 2006, Melvin became a partner in the hospitality and tourism industry by being hired on with the Sky City Cultural Center and Haku Museum as the security manager. From 2006 to 2020, Melvin moved up the ladder from security manager to group tour coordinator and is now the operations manager. Melvin quotes, "Of all the employment opportunities I've experienced in my life, my current role is far best serving as an ambassador for my own Acoma people in the hospitality and tourism industry." We also have with us today Talia Salem, based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and has more of a dozen years of experience in tourism, destination marketing, and content strategy. She runs her own digital marketing and tourism consulting firm, The Urban Nomad, to help travel organizations connect with their target audiences through compelling content, excel at destination marketing, and leverage sustainable tourism. She works with such clients as the World Bank, George Washington University's International Institute of Tourism Studies, Arlington County Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Center for Responsible Travel, Kimpton Hotels and Restaurants, A2B Consulting, and the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe. And last but not least, we have Selene Mattis, who is the Executive Director of the International Institute of Tourism at the George Washington University. She has spent more than 20 years designing and directing large multi-stakeholder initiatives that have mainstreamed sustainable tourism principles into key sectors of the tourism industry. Seleni has worked in close collaboration with governments and private sector and tourism destinations throughout the Americas to develop and implement sustainable management plans and programs that have enhanced the quality of tourism and helped to ensure the long-term health of nature ecosystems. A native of Belize, Seleni served as the country's director of tourism and oversaw the reorganization of the Belize Tourism Board in order to meet the demands of a fiercely competitive global marketplace. Earlier in her career, she developed the country's tour guide training and certificate program and managed the program for Belize ecotourism and tour operation and lodges. So let's start with the questions here. And Seleni, the CDC offers clear data-driven guidance for phased reopening, but many communities may continue to be leery of visitors. What are the critical elements that tribal destinations need to consider in reopening?
Great. That's a fantastic question, Sherry. It's lovely to be here with Melvin and Talia having this conversation about such a huge issue, which is, well, how do we reopen tourism in a manner that's safe, especially for the tribes that, you know, have additional challenges and where the realities might require even more consideration. So, I mean, I think this whole focus on reopening, regardless of where we are, but especially for the tribes, really needs to come back to what it is that we're managing through. And, you know, we continue to battle through this it's a health crisis, right? So recovery of tourism at any point in time starts and ends with getting on top of the pandemic. So tribes really need to think about more than just the guidelines that are needed for reopening. And the community is really at the epicenter of that process. And why do I say this? Well, we know that recovery of tourism really relies on the locals and the local community supporting the reopening to visitors. Unless I, as you know, a community member, feel comfortable getting out and about in my community, it's really problematic to expect that we can host visitors in my place, right? So that's the long and short of it. And if you think about it, when we think about the local businesses in our communities, it's going to be I, as local resident here, that will feel comfortable going out to the restaurant or visiting a nearby attraction, whether it be for a hike on an afternoon or a trail run on the weekend, whatever that is, right? So really the reopening of any place in general, including the reopening of tourism, is so contingent on local residents being a part of it. And we know with how the you know, if we look throughout the US, you know, the numbers are continue to go up, scarily so. And so many tribes are still largely closed, and that makes a lot of sense. And as we've been monitoring the kind of the management, the general sort of management of what's occurring in Indigenous communities throughout the Americas, it's very clear that, you know, the decisions that tribes are making here in the US are very similar to what's happening in Mesoamerica or in South America. By far and large, Indigenous communities are not feeling that it's safe reopening, and there's a good reason why. So really thinking of reopening relies on people feeling safe, getting around their community, and then welcoming others. And without tribal leaders having a good pulse on that, they really run the risk of reopening with pushback from the community or from others, around that community that may also be impacted by that decision. So it's interesting because Longwoods International, they've been monitoring U.S. traveler travel sentiment in the US. And in their latest edition of like what they post, like in terms of, what's happening in the US, this was just earlier this week. So this is like really current insights. They found that only 36% of communities support reopening for tourism at this point. Only 36%. And actually 37% oppose opening at this point in time. And this is a general sort of, canvas. So my guess is that those numbers are even higher for tribal nations, right? That there is still more concern that there is readiness to open at this point because of the numbers that we're seeing in terms of the continued spread of the pandemic. And so this is something that I think we need to be aware of. These numbers are still low, generally speaking, throughout the US. And then in regards to how people are feeling, how comfortable residents are feeling getting out and about and, eating in the restaurant or going out to attractions. And so that same study by Longwoods International found that 41% of residents or travelers feel comfortable going out and shopping or dining in their community, and 43% feel safe traveling outside their community. So these numbers are below 50%, so still quite low. And it's interesting because when you look back at what these same numbers were in June, they were higher, which means that as the numbers have continued to rise in terms of the spread of COVID, people's confidence and their readiness to open up their communities for tourism continues to go down. So I think these indicators give us some sense of where we are now as a nation. And I think, these numbers are definitely much lower, is my guess, for tribal nations where there's even heightened concern about what the opening might bring about for communities. I think it's also important for tribal nations to think about reopening in stages. So even when communities are ready to reopen, that there might be stages of doing so. And I think as we get into the conversation, we'll talk about, what those dynamics are and so forth. But it's clear that, that there needs to be thinking about what that first stage of reopening might look like versus stage 2 and so forth. And again, it all goes back to the communities being at the epicenter of that decision to reopen.
Thank you, Selene. Wow, that's very interesting. So Talia, we have seen many tribal nations move more aggressively than surrounding states to limit travel and enforce other COVID-19 related safety precautions in an effort to protect elders and our vulnerable populations from the virus. How should tribal destinations and tribal businesses communicate these travel restrictions to the general public and eventually information about their reopening?
That's a great question, and it's definitely an unprecedented time right now, so everyone's going to handle this a little bit differently, but it's important to rely on some of the data that Selene mentioned that we'll also share with you in the resources for a way for you to kind of call back on other things and trends so you can figure out exactly what's going on in your community. I think it's very important right now to rely on your tourism partners. So if you're working with operators or other businesses, to make sure you inform them of the operating status. It's very critical right now to update all your online platforms. What I mean by that is your website, your social media, your TripAdvisor, anything that markets your business. That's how travelers are finding updated information. If you are reopening and you don't publish that online somewhere, people are going to assume you're closed and you're going to miss out on that business. I can't encourage that enough. Actually, I happened to take a very big trip a couple months ago in the middle of the pandemic as we drove cross country from Washington, D.C. to California. And so many businesses didn't update anything about their operating procedures or what they're doing for COVID-19. And so we just passed on through because we didn't think they were open or that they were, practicing social distancing or safe travel requirements. So it's very critical that you leverage technology at this time. Hold on one second. While I can understand that is challenging because there are a lot of barriers for technology, there are some simple solutions. Using platforms like TripAdvisor that are already built and you don't have to manage them and you just have to go into the system and update your information. If you don't have a functioning website, I would encourage you to look to those solutions in the short term. Also, Google Places has listings for businesses and communities. I would encourage you to update that. Google actually prefers its own search results when you're looking for something. So if someone is actually looking to come to your nation, they might Google it and Google will put their results to the top. So it's very important that you look at those results and update your information for your community and your businesses. And then lastly, also try to update anything that's in paper or online, offline. So if you have any guidebooks, if it's possible, there's like flyers that you want to update, and also signage. You want to make sure there's signage on the outside of your business before people come in. One of the biggest challenges with travel and tourism is that people, of course, are coming from other places. And so you don't know what kind of regulations they have at those other places. So the other places might not be wearing masks. They might not be doing social distancing. They might not, be taking the pandemic as seriously. And as stewards of your own community, it's your responsibility to communicate those in advance so that you can manage the pandemic within your own nation. And it is a little bit scary, but telling people to do it before they come will make them have a better experience, because ultimately travel and tourism is about having a good experience, having fun, sharing exchanges with other cultures. And so the more that you can tell people up front about what your nation and your government is doing to manage the pandemic, the more people will expect, okay, I know if I'm going to come here, I have to wear a mask. I know that was a lot of information in a short period of time, but I've also provided a link to a webinar that I offered a couple of days ago that actually goes through some of the things you should say to travelers during COVID, how you should say them, where you should say it, what updates you need to make to your website. So that will provide you with some more specific information on how to get that done, because it can be a little bit overwhelming, but I would encourage you to look at everywhere you're talking to your travelers and making sure that those pieces of content are updated. And you don't have to update your whole website, but just the landing page that says COVID policies or coronavirus update. And that way you can put everything in one page and you can keep that page current, but it needs to be done. So think about using this time to analyze your channels, and then when you open, you'll be all ready to go.
Great, thank you, Talia. I have those links she provided for me, so I will follow up with all the attendees and send out an email with those resources. Thank you. And Melvin, how has this pandemic affected your tourism operation? What are the key decisions and steps you are taking to prepare for reopening?
Let's see how far. Okay, so let's see. Good morning, everyone. I read it in my AIANTA language. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you a little bit. If you can maybe turn your volume up.
Okay, give me 1 second. Sorry about that. I turned it down earlier thinking it was too loud, but maybe it is too okay.
Or get closer to your microphone.
Is that better? Much better? Still the same?
Can you get closer to your microphone?
Yeah, give me 1 second. 1 second. Is that better? How about now?
That's better.
Better? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so again, I just greeted you in my AIANTA language, which is pretty common when we have meetings as such. So it's good to be part of this webinar altogether. So yeah, how's the COVID-19 affected our tourism operation? Well, first and foremost, of course, revenue, the biggest part of that. With no tourism traffic, again, we don't make money, of course, because of being closed. It's not just the the Sky City Culture Center Hockey Museum. It's also, of course, our Sky City Casino Hotel, the Travel Center. So by regulation from the state of New Mexico governor, of course, we have to follow those guidelines, of course, how, how we can run business or not. So again, if you see in the news, a lot of the places in the surrounding areas, restaurants are somewhat opening, but only outdoor dining. As for us here, because we have to follow protocol by tribal government leaders, so basically, at this point, we're still closed for visitation and operation altogether. So that plays a very important impact on us. Of course, too, we still have the maintenance and the operation part of the facilities. There's still a cost to that. So the important part of that, of course, with our tribal government and our tribal entities is really seeking funding and assistance, which is available out there. So with the work of our tribal leadership, that's where we're able to help in those areas of need. The other part of that too is, unfortunately, a lot of our Acoma artisans are feeling the impact. When we have tourism, we have visitors come to Acoma. Basically, of course, visitors like to buy artwork from the artisans or even from our gift shop. And, of course, a lot of our Acoma people, that's what they rely on is to make sales off of their arts and crafts, pottery, jewelry. Now they're feeling the impact right now. But again, there is some resources out there. Most recently, there is a grant that's available for these artisans to apply. It's a small business and artisan grant. So again, just cooling those streams to help resolve on impact as far as, us being closed. We have no idea when we're going to open. Quite frankly, it doesn't look like anytime soon, unfortunately. Possibly even until maybe next year as far as with the tourism program. Even with that being said, as far as the impact, visitors themselves, they call us, they send, of course, on the website, it's the messages, when you're going to open, and it's a disappointment to them as well because they really want to come out and see our historical site and get to learn about, of course, who we are as Native Americans. And it's also a lot of visitors that have already been there before and will want to come back. They bring their family, their friends. So it is a big impact for all of us, both on our side as tribal members, as Native Americans, as well as the visitors that come out. So what are the key decisions and steps that we're taking to prepare for reopening? Well, first and foremost, having a safety plan in place. You got to have that. So what I mean is, of course, following CDC guidelines. Of course, also, when we collaborate with the tribal government leaders, and of course, the business enterprise executive management, it's a matter of making sure that we are actually, those of us that are essential workers at this point, are practicing all the guidelines as far as, being safe, practicing social distancing, and most importantly, getting tested periodically, because again, we want to make sure that we're not spreading this amongst ourselves. And right now, it's interesting enough, but it's a good way to somewhat monitor as far as traffic flow. We only have one entrance in and out of the reservation at this time, when typically we will have about 4 locations where you can enter into the reservation or exit out as well. At that one location, we only have, we have a security checkpoint. So we're really being strict about that. We're not letting any visitors in at all into the reservation at this point. And it's only because we want to protect our people. We want to make sure that, they are not being, having visitors come in. And the concern too is when we open up tourism at Acoma, I'm sure some of you are familiar about how Acoma, where it's located, of course, the old village on the mesa top. And that's the concern, is letting people come in and possibly, we don't know, of course, we could take every precaution and the spread of the COVID to the members on the mesa top. So that's a big concern that we have. So that's the reason why we're still closed at this time. Those are part of the procedures that we're doing. And just basically collaborating with the tribal government, and then again, just getting their feedback. Okay, where we're at, what are we doing? What do we need to do now? So with that being said, again, too, communicating with other tribal tourism programs. What are they doing? Are they open? Are they not open? What are they planning to do? And just sharing those ideas with one another. Hey, this is what we're going to do. Maybe that's something you can do. And so just sharing those, thoughts as far as reopening back up again. Um, so the one thing that we're doing right now is actually we're ready to launch a new website, and part of that new website is going to offer online shopping in our gift shop. We have a lot of people inquiring about, well, we want to buy pottery, or we want to buy jewelry from Acoma people. How do we go about that? So there's two ways that we're doing that. Of course, having the online shopping available, and also communicating with our artisans and getting their contact information. And also then just providing and filtering that out to the people that are interested, and they can deal with them directly and hopefully make those sales for themselves as well. So again, it's our way of helping our own people all together. Another thing that we did too was most recently we did a video of our museum. The day that we were supposed to open one of our new exhibits on March 14th was the same day that we closed. So we said, hey, why can't we just do a video of it and put it on the website? So that's what we did. So it's just a matter of getting that information out to the people, because they can't come in. With this new website we're going to launch, which is really going to benefit us, because we're not only promoting Acoma Pueblo, the Sky City Cultural Center, and the Haka Museum, we're also promoting our big game hunts, Sky City Casino Hotel, Travel Center, and the surrounding areas as well. So with this new website, I mean, it's going to be really unique because you can do, again, online shopping, you can watch videos, you can also be able to join the Haku Museum by purchasing a membership. And there's incentives for that membership as well. It's limited right now this year, yes, of course, because we're closed, but we'll still honor those certain incentives come next year as well. And we're already planning for 2021. It's just around the corner. So we're already taking reservations, group reservations for 2021 already. And of course, with this new website, we're going to really go, be ready for next year. But again, it's just really that moral support for one another this year to get through. And it plays a very hardship impact on a lot of our people because they express it. So, I mean, we're cooped up really in reality within our own reservations within here for Acoma. It's very limited. We have to be cautious. We have to be smart to not go out and, mingle with people out there, because you don't know if they have the COVID or not. So again, it's taking those necessary precautions. We can't even let our kids go off the reservation because of this part of that, a mandate that has been identified by the tribal government leadership. But it's in the best interest, of course, for the health of everyone. So those are the things that we're doing as far as how we've been impacted by COVID-19.
Thank you, Melvin. That was great. I hope you guys get to open soon.
I hope so too.
Okay, so Lenny, destination and business reputation is tied to visitors' perception of health and safety now more than ever. In addition to adopting rigorous safety protocols, what can destinations and businesses expect in regards to visitor behavior, and how can they help ensure that visitors abide by the new guidelines?
That's a big question. Okay, let's take it in little parts. So yeah, I think that, just as like kind of the main theme in responding to the first question that you had, which is communities are, or should be the main, how ready communities are should be such a big part of deciding when to reopen. You also need visitors to be respectful of the rules and guidelines that you have when they do come. At the moment you're ready for reopening, and that happens in a phased manner, perhaps. Visitors, you have to work to ensure that visitors are are understanding what the new rules are and respecting them. Now, this is very complicated here in the US because we have such a patchwork, right, of rules and regulations. And my guess is, and we're seeing this, and I think Melvin mentioned this already, that, you know, in tribal nations are being much more careful. And so the rules will be stricter for visiting tribal nations. And so there's going to have to be a lot of effort put in by tribal leaders working with tribal businesses to just make sure that there's enough communication about that. And Talia gave a whole bunch of great examples of how tribal businesses could be doing that. But from a destination standpoint, I think it's important that tribal leaders have a good sense of that, you know, to make sure that the right laws are in place and the guidelines are in place, so that if tribal businesses are saying that, you know, if you're not wearing a mask, you can't come in, that that can actually be enforced, right? So that there has to be this working of tribal governments with tribal businesses to make sure that, you know, that the proper laws are on the books for this, and that these guidelines can be enforced where people feel strongly that that's the best way to go. That's definitely one thing. I think the second part, Talia alluded to, sort of the second idea here, which is that tribal nations will need to ensure that there's like consistent communication throughout like all the different businesses. So like, for instance, in Melvin's case, he was mentioning the casino, the cultural center, the various attractions. So everyone really has to be sort of on the same page with this. And in some places there's been, I think of the Colorado Tourism Office, and this is one of the links that we're going to send to you. They've been doing like a really good job encouraging travelers to like wear their masks. So they have all these signage, you know, that's like really cool, and tries to get the travelers or the visitors to their places to like really wear the mask, please, you know. And so there are things that the tribal nation will have to do to make this happen because of the patchwork. And we know how divisive this issue has been nationally, right? So we need to recognize that, and we need to like plan for this and not really think that it's going to fix itself, that this does require some effort on the part of tribal governments working with tribal businesses. Another part of this really has more, it's less the stick and more the carrot approach. And it's encouraging travelers to maybe think about doing what they should be doing by incentivizing them to do so. So, you know, if you're coming out, let's say to the cultural center, and you know, you wear a mask and you get to like post it on your Instagram, you know, that you're wearing a mask at the cultural center, you might get a pair of earrings, let's say, you know, or like a little giveaway, a little something, you know, that you might take back from the cultural. So that this is communicated that, you know, if there is that abiding by the rules, there's a little bit of like carrot in there. So thinking of creative ways to really sort of engage visitors to do what they should be doing, but don't necessarily always do, as we know is happening. And I think, you know, the last part of this is really sort of working with the service providers. So your guides, your, you know, the staff that may be at the cultural centers, etc., to really be prepared for the visitors and dealing with behavior that may be inappropriate or not abide by the rules that are set. And this is, you know, we've been polling destination management organizations outside the US about this. And, you know, the biggest concern that businesses have is like, how do they prepare their staff to be able to respond to a guest that's not complying with the rules, especially when they're paying, because they're paying, right? They're paying to come into your cultural center. And they might not be abiding by the rules. And so staff really is putting a lot on the line health-wise, to be there. And then they have to, on top of that, like figure out how to deal with this maybe misbehaving visitors, right? And so it's also making sure that beyond just the guidelines that are offered, that there is a little bit of preparation given to the service, the frontline staff, on how to deal with guests that may not be abiding by the rules. That helps to keep them safe, keep the community safe, and really sort of ensures that tourism can be sustained, that you don't have to close back, with time, because people aren't following the rules, and we know what happens when that occurs. Spread definitely extends. So anyway, those are, I think, some of the ideas that different places have been using and thinking about in responding to consumer behavior, like those travelers coming in and not really abiding by the guidelines set. It's complicated, and it takes a multi-pronged approach to really get at it. There are things that the destination has to do, the business has to do, and then there's work between the tribal government and the businesses to just make sure that there's a host of actions in place to ensure that we encourage visitors to do what is right when they visit.
Thank you, Selene. That's great information. Talia, COVID-19 has dramatically changed tourism trends. What kind of market shifts should destinations expect? And what type of experiences are travelers looking for?
Yes, I think these market changes will happen, for some time to come. I think one of the biggest shifts in the marketplace will be who your customers actually are. So I know some tribal nations market a lot to the international audience, and I think it's safe to say that they can't count on those visitors for some time. So that's a sad realization, but something that we need to consider going forward. So thinking about, first of all, who your customers are and where they're coming from. Likely, people are going to be coming from a drive market area. So when you're thinking about how you're talking to customers and where you're marketing to your customers, thinking about closer in, maybe even the communities right outside of your nation. So thinking about those shifts in the marketplace, that's probably going to be the biggest one. Some people will still feel comfortable flying, and there's various data on that. And those people might be your customers, but it'll be harder to separate out who's going to be kind of in the drive market area and who's going to feel comfortable flying. So that's the biggest shift. I think the other shift is people are tending to go for longer periods of time because it's a hassle now to travel during COVID because of all the health and safety protocols and, cleaning your hotel room every time you go in there. People, there's been research to show that people are actually staying, instead of going on 2 3-week vacations or 2 1-week vacation, they're going on 1 2-week vacation. So there might be people that are in a community nearby to you that are staying there for 2 weeks and will need more things to do. So thinking about a longer vacation that's kind of like a staycation, but not exactly like being at home, that gives you an opportunity to reach those customers while they're looking for something to do because they're there for longer. So not to harp on the same thing, but it's very important to make sure that you're claiming all of your online listings that are location-based, so people can see, oh, actually I'm in this town over, but there is this tribal nation nearby and there's these activities that are open to us. So those are very important trends to keep in mind. The other things, of course, are COVID-19 health trends, as far as keeping your experiences outside, keeping them in smaller numbers, which I think would align well with a lot of the cultural heritage products we've seen out there. They tend to be more intimate tours anyways. So looking at your tour operations and making sure they meet those guidelines. There are some resources that Selene mentioned and that will be followed up with that share proper tour operation guidelines for your businesses, but definitely making sure to adapt to those outdoor tourism options with food even delivery and things like that are going to be trends there as well. And the last trend that I want to mention that is not physical tourism like we've been talking about, but actually virtual tourism. We've been working on a project. I'm actually working with Selene and GW and Virginia Tech on a project where we're working with entrepreneurs to bring their tourism products on in a virtual space. That is a great potential for many different destinations because one, if your destination is very remote and people might not be going there right now anyways, it allows you to bring your product online. And two, like Melvin mentioned, you know, they're not open yet. They're not sure when they're going to open. So it allows you to still share your tourism product while you're closed in a safe, controlled environment. But you can still share your culture and your stories to these audiences who, like myself, are super bored at home. So we've seen a lot of people interested in learning more about different tribal nations. And I've taken some tours online where we've had really big audiences because they're curious about different traditions or art, food. So this is an opportunity for you to take your existing business, your talents, and put it in an online virtual tour. So I think that's a really big potential. And all that's going to do really is drive more tourism to your destination when this is all over. So something to keep in mind. I'm happy to chat more with any of you about that if you're curious about what we're doing. This is a very emerging field as well and kind of a new trend, but it is really the only safe way for tourism because you're not coming into contact with anyone and all you really need is a computer and an internet connection and a story, and you can kind of bring that to life. So that would be the biggest trend, and it seems like, you know, Airbnb is doing it and a lot of other companies are kind of getting in that space. So hopefully this will inspire you to think about that while you're closed and to keep your spirits up. I mean, it's great to connect with people like we are right now and to feel like we're part of this world that we were once a part of, you know, many months ago. So hopefully that's an option too as far as trends.
Thank you, Talia. And Melvin, when you look to the future, how are you planning for the subsequent waves of COVID? What do you believe tribal enterprises need to make it through the year?
Yes, you know, until they find a cure for COVID-19, of course, we're always going to take those necessary precautions that are provided, of course, the CDC guidelines, of course, from the state tribal leadership. And so as part of that, again, really, I think as I mentioned earlier, it's just having that moral support for one another and telling each other, we're going to get through this. We're going to survive this, and we're going to get back on our feet and start operations again. And so as part of that, again, throughout the different waves, again, when we talk about COVID-19 waves, we actually see it in reality across the nation, more so, I think, out of the Native American reservations, really, I can honestly say that right now here at Yakima, we have right now at 33 cases, which is very low, it's a good number, but I mean, it's not nice to say that there are that many cases, but even so, we're doing our part as far as following those guidelines. So the real impact of it all, when we prepare, of course, and have a plan in place, is again, just continuing to monitor where we need to go. And one good thing that's happening is from tribal leadership, we have our very own governor that will come on and do a Zoom presentation to the people and just letting them know where we're at and encourage them to be strong, to be faithful. You know, when you really think about it, us as Native American tribes, as we grew up, of course, back from the old days, and you think about our elders, our ancestors, you know, we knew how to survive. We knew, and we still do today as Native Americans. Yes, I think too, when we get caught up in modern technology and society, we're spoiled, if I may say. But the truth of the matter is, we know how to survive. So again, it's just having support with one another within our own families. And that's how we're going to get through as far as part of that planning stage, not just with businesses, but as individual family members all together. So as far as what do we believe tribal enterprises need to do for the remainder of the year, is basically, as I mentioned, just being there for our people. Again, there, and when the people see that, it makes have them a sense of relief to say that, you know, our tribal government leadership, our business entities are actually, you know, concerned about us, and they're taking every precaution that we need to stay safe. So basically, you know, there are those of us that are considered essential workers. And so, like for myself, I go to work 5 days a week, but as a manager, it's never 5 days a week. It's 7 days a week. So again, part of that is what are we planning? What do we want? What are expectations for our people, especially when our workers come back? How are they going to feel? It's going to be, as we call it, the new norm. It's going to be totally different. It's going to be a different feeling, but just assuring them that, you know, we're going to take those safety precautions. We're going to make sure when visitors do come back, even if it's into next year, basically, we're still going to practice social distancing. We're still going to wear a mask. We're going to make sure they wear their mask. We're going to do testing of the visitors as well to make sure if they don't have a mask on, they can't come into the building. They can't go on the mesa top. Those are, again, all the precautions we do have to take, and it's really for all of us all together. Because again, that assures that we're making sure and that our people understand and realize that, yeah, we're making sure that they're going to be safe as well. So again, tribal entities basically all across the board really need that moral support from tribal leadership, first and foremost, to their people. And when the people see that, they get that sense of security altogether. But again, it's really up to all of us individually to make that effort, to be safe, to be sound, and again, to look for the future. So that way, when we actually open back up, when our visitors come back, they too will know that we're taking all the necessary precautions for their safety as well, for their health as well. And we want them to enjoy their time with us because we have a lot to share as Native Americans in general. The history that we have behind our own people here. And again, what is it for the future for the children? Again, the grandchildren, they're our future. So we got to make sure that we have all these plans, all these efforts in place. And again, I always emphasize this most importantly is just having that moral support for one another. You got to give yourselves and each other's confidence to say that we're going to get through this. You know, there was a saying from one of my tribal members at one time said, you know, COVID-19 is different, but you know what? There's always been disease or anything, sickness throughout all the years that we've been here. But this is just a different type of, pandemic that has hit us, and we just have to learn to how to deal with that. So again, like I said earlier, and again, just Haley and Selena's sharing your thoughts as well. It's really, really helpful in helping us to better understand where we need to be. And again, I think us having this webinar is really, really essential and crucial for many others out there that are asking questions. What do we do? How are you handling this? You know, can we get some pointers from you? And that's what it should be. We should all be communicating and helping one another with our great ideas. That's my feedback on that. So,
Okay, thank you, Melvin.
mhm.
COVID-19 has forced brick and mortar businesses to move online, a fact that only emphasized the inadequate broadband coverage for so many tribes. Knowing these connectivity issues, how can tourism destinations and businesses leverage technology from their cell phones to support their operations? So Lenny, how do you feel about that with destinations?
Okay. So, you know, from a destination standpoint, there are things that, you know, and when I refer to a destination, maybe I'm referring mainly to like the tribal leaders, you know, and government. So, you know, they're looking at it as a whole overall, you know, the place itself. And for those tribes that may have tourism offices, but we know that they're very few and in between. So, you know, a lot of it may happen a little organically in most tribal nations. So as a destination, though, there are some things I think, you know, a lot of people are understanding how important it is to be able to provide training to the businesses to be able to do the things that Talia mentioned. So that's like a destination responsibility. It's, you know, really bringing tribal businesses together to learn, you know, how through your phone, you go online to make sure that you're checking out your, you know, you've claimed your business in Google for sure. So that like people know that you're there in that place, that you're exist and are operating, and then how to update your profile to make sure that people know what your opening hours are and if there are any guidelines or rules that you have there. But the you know, not everyone knows how to do that. And that is like everywhere, not just, you know, in tribal nations. This is like throughout the US and beyond. And so there are a lot of destinations that are working together to make sure that all the businesses or many businesses in that destination do in fact do that, know how to do it, and go on and actually update their profiles so that, you know, there's, as a place, there's accurate updated information about what the visitors can expect so that they don't show up, you know, and you're closed. And then it's hard, right? It's just like, it's hard to work backward that way. So I think the training, the capacity building of businesses to be able to do that, it's something that destinations can definitely help with. I think the next thing that destinations need to think about is really supporting businesses. And I think Melvin has just, you know, you've definitely made my Friday, I think, a little bit easier here. Like, you know, in terms of like, we often forget that we're in this together and that we have to work through it together. And so the destination needs to inspire that too, you know, and really sort of help its businesses make it through, because it's not easy. And with every passing month, there are more casualties, meaning probably businesses that will not be able to open back their doors when things come back to more normal. And this is a reality, right? So at the destination level, it's also looking at, you know, making sure that you know, if there is a tourism office or if not, tribal government is really working to make sure that the tribal businesses can access the limited help that exists and that is there and often hard to reach. You know, it's also looking at the role of CDFIs in providing additional support beyond, above and beyond maybe the programs that may exist, but we know that the programs that exist aren't meeting the needs of tribal nations. You know, we see this not only here in the US, but also in Canada, where they've been tracking how profoundly all the efforts over the last 20 plus years to help, you know, their indigenous businesses in tourism do well, it's all falling apart. And it's, you know, it's because the financing and the help that's coming from government isn't really tuned into the needs of indigenous businesses. And we can say, I think, the same for, you know, in our neck of the woods here in the US. So we really have to find creative ways of helping businesses. The third and last thing is, you know, we need to also think of how to make experiences a little less, more contactless. I mean, I think this has been, you know, a huge discussion. It's, yeah, right? So how, and we know that in Indian country, if you're coming, like if I'm taking a tour with someone, I'm gonna have cash to pay that person at the end of the tour, right? Because most micro entrepreneurs in Indian country prefer to work in cash. And so this is something that's a reality, and that we have to find creative solutions around. Like, so, well, how do we work with PayPal? How can we use some of these other technologies perhaps, or like Venmo? But again, we go back to some of like the issues and challenges that we had pre-COVID that are bigger problems now, that maybe most entrepreneurs might not have a checking account. So how can you then pay them via Venmo and so forth, right? So these are a lot of the challenges that we had before in helping to support cultural tourism in Indian countries still exists now, but we're still forced with finding solutions. So those are some of the things I think that at the destination level, tribal nations may need to be thinking about.
Thank you, Selene. And Talia, how do you feel about that in relation to businesses in general?
Yeah, I think a lot of what Selene said, she kind of teed me up very well, really applies to businesses. The biggest challenge, I think, is capacity building, especially when you can't come in contact with people. So you're asking to train people on the platforms they're not comfortable using, and that is a huge challenge. And I'm having that challenge even outside of tribal nations. I'm also working on a small business training that I referenced in the Upper Peninsula and Marquette County. So they still have the same issues with the bandwidth. So they might not have internet. They're not familiar using Zoom, or, I send them a PowerPoint presentation. They might not be familiar using that. But the only way I have to access them is through Zoom and the internet. So it's kind of it's really a challenge in rural areas as a whole. One of the ways that we were talking about with that community actually getting the information out is having someone who does have internet download the presentation and video, put it on a flash drive, and actually drop it off contactless to the different small businesses. So there are some challenges that we have to work around, but I think with really cohesive communities, we can get around some of those challenges. But the bandwidth and technology issues are something that we're going to have to continue to work towards to build capacity. Not to mention that a lot of these small business owners are extremely overwhelmed. They have probably way less staffs. They're navigating unemployment and all these other issues of just trying to stay afloat. So then we're telling them, go on the internet and update everything that you might not even know what it is. So I think that is overwhelming, but thankfully in the age of the internet, there are tons of business resources online that are free. So even just Googling answers to your questions or how you do things, you'll come up with a lot of really great options. When there is limited connectivity, it seems like a lot of entrepreneurs have access to colleges and places like that with internet. So I would encourage destinations to work with those businesses to go out to those places with internet and update your profiles where you can. I mean, even if it's just that one touch point where you update everything and then you say, phone is the best way to reach us, then you do that and you work with what you have. But it is a very challenging time, but there are, again, lots of great free resources out there. So I would encourage businesses to use that and to talk to their partners. I mean, everyone's going through the same struggles. And so maybe one business figured out, I get Wi-Fi on this corner of my block, or I go to this place and I know that it works really well. And these are the things that have worked for us. So I think that's definitely something that you should do, is come together as much as you can virtually and safely through the internet, through phone calls, through text message, whatever you use. I think Facebook Messenger is a huge way to get together. Set up a group on Facebook Messenger of all the small businesses in your community and talk to each other about the challenges you're having and see who's doing which different things, because you can all help each other remotely and hopefully get through this. We're all trying to figure it out, but there are resources, and we'll make ourselves available as well.
Thank you, Talia. And Melvin, how are you thinking about technology?
Well, we're doing it right now. We're Zooming. We can actually see each other. We can hear each other. It's the way of the future. And again, that's the thing that we encourage our younger generation to be a part of. And again, when we talk about as far as tourism and hospitality, again, just getting on a webinar or putting out a message from our destinations and letting them know that we still exist. And then, of course, when it comes to that time, basically, again, with technology, we can be able to have them, again, as I mentioned earlier, or we talked about having a website that's going to really be eye-catching. That's the most important part of that all, is you got to make sure that your website is very interesting and very inviting. So again, updating it as well with a lot of good information. I mentioned earlier that, of course, like I said, we're going to launch a new website. If you go to the website that we have right now and you try to launch onto it with a cell phone, it's very distorted. You can't see a lot of good images. So with technology today, you can be able to do that as well. So again, with the web designer that you have in place, it's basically going to help with that type of setup to make sure that you have quality image. Of course, and just being able just to get out there and let the world know that we're still here. One other program that's available also is it's called the Google Dmo Program, and it's a partnership program, of course, that is available for us through the state New Mexico Tourism Department. But I'm sure that's also available nationwide. And with that being said, people can Google, of course, people always Google locations, but you can also upload a lot of great information and updated information. That's most important, because a lot of times when people will call or they'll email, well, we checked out your website and this is looks very outdated. So that's the most important aspect of it all, especially with technology today, is making sure that information is updated. And again, let them know, I mean, we're still thinking about you. We encourage you to come back and visit with us. But in the meantime, visit our website or give us a call. We're here for you. And again, different types of memberships that are available out there as well. That's the one good way of keeping in the loop as well, to be a part of who we are. Because again, they want to come see us. They're just excited to come out, explore Native American country, like I said earlier. But until that time comes, technology is there for us to be able to continue to stay one step ahead for the not only the people that are wanting to come to visit us, our own people. If you think about it, school, fall is starting pretty soon, right? At this point, of course, for us, our students won't be able to go to to the school to have classes. So what has happened is they've provided Chrome notebooks to the high school students and I believe middle school students, so they can be able to do online classes. So again, that also encourages the students to continue to stay with their education. And again, because they're not going to be in an active classroom setting, still they have to get that education and get to that point where eventually they'll graduate from high school and go on to college or any kind of career opportunity they may want to seek. At least then we can still be there to support them in that way. So.
Thank you, Melvin. We're about up on our hour, but I do have one more question to all of you. What do you believe could help tribal destinations and tourism business be more competitive upon reopening? And we have a couple questions that we need to get to in the Q&A. So do you want to go first, Selene?
So quickly, I think, this was already mentioned, but like really making sure that you're building from the foundation, which is like those people that are closest to you, that's, we see that people are still very concerned about traveling and traveling far, although that is happening, to some extent, and that's growing slowly. Still, the numbers are quite low. So, remain competitive, you got to make sure that you're catering and that you work and your focus is on that your community, like the local community and those areas that are nearest to you. I think at the end of the day, they're the ones that will come first and, will help to support the rebuilding of tourism.
Talia, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that despite all that's going on, you're going to be competitive if you stay true to your product and who you are and what you're offering. The beauty of every nation being different and independent is that you have something that is literally nowhere else in the world, and that makes you very competitive. So making sure that you hone in on those differences, what makes you unique and special. Even during the COVID pandemic, you're still the same place with the same beautiful things to share with the world. So stay true to yourself and really work on how you're talking about yourself and differentiating yourself from the place next to you, from the place around the corner from you, across the state from you, because you are like nowhere else. And that's a big part of what makes you competitive.
And Melvin?
I would have to say, as far as, being competitive, again, as I would say, just be one step ahead. Again, when it comes to that point, when we reopen, the idea I have is basically just letting people know out there, hey, let's have a big celebration here. Let's have some sort of special event, and advertise that. Let's have some native dances take place. Let's have some red baking demonstrations take place. Entice them to want to come back when that time comes. But again, as far as being competitive, basically what the other two said, just against being there for one another and just being very supportive. That's the biggest part of it all. It's really just being strong and just being paid for the same day. Hey, we're gonna make it. We're gonna make it to this COVID-19, and again, we've got a bright future ahead of us.
Thank you, Melvin. While I do have you on the screen here, we do have one question for you that someone asked how artists can access the small business artisan grants. Do you have a list that's available that maybe you could email to me and I can send it out?
Yes, definitely. Yes, I sure can. Yes, I'll forward that to you. We do have it posted on our Facebook page there for the Sky City Culture Center, as well as with Pebble Acomon. But definitely, yeah, we can filter that to you as well as other programs, and that it's available.
Okay,
Yes.
I can add that to the other resources that I'll be sending out that Talia has provided.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, and then let's see. So Lenny, as we close, I know we have a slide we wanted to share on the George Washington University, George Washington Cultural Heritage Certificate Program. Do you want to just touch briefly on that real quick?
Sure. Yeah. I have a slide. Do you mind making me?
No, go ahead.
So that, okay, cool. So this is for everyone. I hope everyone here is thinking about the Professional Certificate in Cultural Heritage Tourism. It's a wonderful course that is offered by George Washington University in collaboration with AIANTA. We've had it for several years now, so several cohorts have come through the program and spoken so highly about it. It will be offered on October 5th, and it runs from October 5th through November 22nd. It's 6 courses that make up the certificate program. They're all self-paced. So we cover a course per week, but you work on the course over that week at your own pace. Special guest lectures are organized every week. So you have an opportunity to come in to meet others that are in your cohort, to interact a bit, to learn from each other that way. But then you could finish up your readings and so forth. You could go as deep as you'd like to, although there are options. So there are options in terms of like how much you want to do on that specific course. We're covering cultural heritage tourism, resilience tourism, which is the course that I'm doing this year, tourism planning and management, community-based tourism product development, tourism marketing, which Talia does, and workforce development. So those are the 6 courses. You need to register by World International Day of Peace, September 21. So just remember that. Go to bed thinking about September 21, and you need to sign up by then. We will send out, along with the, the resources that Sherry has mentioned that we've compiled. We'll definitely send out the link, the registration link to the course. So hopefully you can make it. If you have any questions, Ana Barrera is on as well. I see Ana on the call, and Ana manages the program, and so she can sort of walk through any question that you may have, and she'll provide all the responses and details you need to learn more to determine if this is what you want to do. So hopefully it is, and we will see you in that program come early October.
Thank you.
That's it, Sherry.
And thank all of you panelists for joining us today. We need to wrap up here. I hate to keep everyone, from their day. We will be posting this webinar on the AIANTA website, and I will send a link to your email address when I send the other resource list. Our next webinar titled How Does Tribal Placemaking Intersect with Tribal Tourism Marketing is scheduled for August 13th. For more details and registration, please visit our website at www.ianta.org, and you can sign up for that webinar as well. I want to thank you all again for being here. We appreciate you joining us, and you have a great day, and we'll see you at the next webinar.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah,
Happy Friday.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Melvin. Bye, Talia. It was so lovely to see you guys and share space with you.
Thank you. Same as well. You have a great weekend, all of you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Melvin. Bye.